The maitre d' whispered the reservation name as if it carried royal blood. Whitmore party of two. Every head in La Terrasse Bleue turned slightly. Even in a restaurant that hosted senators and film stars, the Whitmores drew attention. Victoria Whitmore, Billionaire's wife, charity board regular and patron saint of self-importance, glided in wearing white silk that shimmered like frost. The maitre d' bowed, she expected no less. Her husband, James, followed, a man who looked perpetually half-apologetic for the money he didn't earn but lived on. Their favorite corner table waited, overlooking the city lights spilling down San Francisco's hills. The place was candlelit calm, soft jazz, crystal glasses, low laughter. It smelled of truffle butter and money. Victoria removed her gloves as if shedding boredom. "Darling, remind them not to seat anyone too close. I'd like to hear myself think." James nodded, already signaling the staff. Moments later, the waiter approached with menus printed on thick parchment. Victoria accepted hers without looking up. Sparkling water, room temperature, 3 ice cubes in a side glass. She always gave orders as if testing obedience. Across the room, another reservation arrived unannounced, no spectacle. A tall black man in a charcoal suit, traveling light, the quiet confidence of someone used to leading without needing attention. The hostess checked the list, smiled, and guided him to a table diagonally opposite the Whitmores. Victoria's eyes flicked up. "Really?" she murmured. James didn't answer. He knew that tone, part whisper, part judgment. The man settled in, ordered without fuss, pulled out a tablet. The staff treated him with professional respect. He thanked them by name after glancing at their badges. Small, human gestures. Victoria leaned toward her husband. "He's using an iPad at dinner. In here, it ruins the ambience." "Vic, please," James said under his breath. She ignored him. And no jacket valet, people these days don't understand decorum. The waiter poured her wine, a 2015 Cabernet Reserve, crimson and proud. She swirled it theatrically. Across the aisle, the man took a quiet phone call. His tone was even, precise. "Yes, I'll confirm the final acquisition after dinner. Tell legal to prepare the documents." Then softly, "Make sure Whitmore Industries numbers are included in the review." Victoria froze mid-sip. "Whitmore Industries." James frowned. What did he just? She waved him off, half listening now, curiosity pricking through arrogance. The waiter returned to clear bread plates, bumping slightly against Victoria's chair as he passed between tables. The jolt tilted her glass. A small splash of wine dotted her sleeve. She gasped like she'd been stabbed. "Watch where you're going." The waiter apologized instantly, reaching for a napkin. "I'm terribly sorry, ma'am." But Victoria was already standing, her chair screeching against the marble floor, drawing eyes. "Do you know how much this costs?" she hissed. "You people need training before you." "Victoria," James said sharply. He said he's sorry. The waiter looked mortified. The room went still in that awful, delicate way expensive rooms do when wealth meets cruelty. And then in the silence, the man with the tablet stood. He reached the scene in 3 calm steps. His voice was low but carried across every table. "Ma'am, accidents happen. The gentleman already apologized." Victoria turned toward him, startled. "I wasn't talking to you." "I know," he said, "but maybe you should have been talking to him, not at him." Gasps fluttered through the restaurant. The waiter stepped back, grateful and terrified at once. Victoria's chin lifted, defensive smile hardening. "And who exactly are you to instruct me on manners in my restaurant?" The man tilted his head slightly. "Oh, I don't believe you own it." Laughter bubbled from another table, quickly stifled, but it spread like static. Victoria flushed. "You seem to know quite a bit about ownership. What are you, a food critic?" He smiled faintly, something like that. Her pride kicked harder than sense. Then perhaps you should mind your own business before I make a call that. Victoria, James whispered, panic creeping in. Please sit down. She didn't. Instead, she lifted her glass again, half full now, and gestured with it in the air between them. Some people simply don't understand where they are, she said loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear. The man didn't flinch. His calm became a mirror, reflecting her ugliness back at her. You're right, he said quietly, some people don't. And with that, he turned to the trembling waiter. May I have a clean napkin, please? I believe some of her wine may have splashed on the floor. He knelt, dabbed the marble once, and placed the napkin neatly on the edge of Victoria's table, an act so composed it humiliated no one but her. Then he returned to his seat. The entire restaurant breathed out at once. Victoria stood motionless, cheeks burning. The man resumed his dinner, scrolling through documents, untouched by her drama. James leaned close, whisper furious. Do you have any idea what you just did? That's Damon Ellison. She blinked. Who? The CEO of Ellison Holdings. He's on the cover of Forbes this month. We've been trying to secure a joint venture with him for months. Her stomach dropped. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? At that moment the maitre d' returned, face tight with diplomacy. Mrs. Whitmore, is everything all right? Victoria forced a brittle laugh. Of course, just a little spill. But the damage had already been done. Phones had recorded the scene. Whispers drifted. That's her. The Whitmore woman. Did you see how she talked to him? Across the room, Damon Ellison finished his call. His tone was calm, almost gentle. Yes, proceed as discussed. And note, partnership with Whitmore Industries, reevaluate immediately. He ended the call, slipped the phone into his pocket, and looked once toward Victoria. Not anger, not vengeance, just quiet, measured disappointment. It stung worse than rage. Victoria sank back into her chair, heart thudding against silk. She felt the eyes still on her, the silent judgment hanging heavier than any verdict. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to say. The pianist resumed playing, soft, uncertain chords filling the air where pride had cracked. And somewhere deep inside that fragile silence, the first thread of her empire began to unravel. The pianist's melody smoothed over the noise, but the tension still clung to the air like smoke. Crystal glasses trembled faintly in people's hands. Whispered conversations fluttered and fell silent again. Victoria Whitmore sat frozen, staring at the man across the room, Damon Ellison. The name echoed in her mind like a curse she hadn't meant to summon. She remembered seeing his face once. On the cover of Forbes, the architect of modern markets, how one CEO rebuilt American logistics. At the time she'd skimmed the article, assumed he was just another startup success story. She hadn't realized he was a billionaire several times over, or that his company's cloud systems quietly powered half the defense sector. Now he sat there, the man she'd publicly insulted, eating dinner as if nothing had happened. That silence was worse than any argument. It wasn't indifference, it was control. Damon Ellison didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. He only had to exist in it. His posture, the way he moved, everything about him said, I know exactly who I am. And that was the problem. Because Victoria didn't. Across from her, James still hadn't touched his food. You need to apologize, he said quietly. I will after dinner. After dinner, Victoria, he's sitting right there. He could destroy us with a single phone call. She bristled. You're overreacting. James set down his fork. You poured wine on a man who could buy this restaurant 10 times over. The waiter returned to clear their plates, hands still shaking slightly. Would either of you care for dessert? Victoria forced a smile. Yes, something light. Then, without thinking, and send a bottle of wine to that gentleman's table. The 2010 Bordeaux, my compliments. James blinked. Are you trying to apologize or make it worse? but she was already watching Damon's reaction. The waiter delivered the bottle. Damon looked at it, then at her, expression unreadable. For a moment she thought he might accept. Instead, he simply gestured for the waiter to take it back. "No, thank you," he said. "Please give it to your staff instead. They've had a long night." The waiter nodded, almost relieved. The gesture rippled through the room, quiet, dignified, unarguable. Victoria's throat tightened. He made me look small without even trying. James exhaled slowly. "There it is," he muttered. "That's the kind of grace you can't buy." Victoria didn't answer. She stared down at her napkin, folding and refolding it. For the first time in her life, she felt exposed, not by scandal but by contrast. Damon finished his meal, signed the check, and stood to leave. He didn't glance back, didn't say a word. But as he walked past her table, the energy shifted. Conversations paused again. Heads turned. He stopped briefly beside her chair. "You might not realize it yet," he said softly, "but sometimes the world teaches humility when we least expect it." And then he was gone. No anger, no retaliation, just quiet truth. Victoria sat there long after the door closed behind him, the pianist moving on to a melancholy tune. The restaurant had gone back to normal, but her world had not. James leaned forward, voice low. "Do you have any idea what just happened?" She shook her head slowly. "He just gave you mercy when he could have given you ruin." But mercy, she would learn, is not the same as escape. 2 hours later. Their driver guided the Bentley through the city streets in silence. Victoria stared out the window, replaying every second of the encounter. The way he'd spoken to her, calm, steady, unshaken, it unnerved her more than rage ever could have. At a red light, her phone buzzed. A notification from Market Pulse News. "Breaking: Ellison Holdings to review partnerships with multiple defense suppliers, sources say." James leaned over. "That's us," he said quietly. She didn't answer. By the time they reached their home in Pacific Heights, her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Emails, texts, calls. Even her father had sent a single ominous message. "What did you do?" Inside, the marble foyer felt colder than usual. Victoria walked straight to the grand piano and sat down, staring at her reflection in the black lacquer. "You think he'll really pull the contract?" she asked finally. James rubbed his temples. "He doesn't have to pull it. All he has to do is question it publicly. The investors will do the rest." A long silence. Then softly, almost to herself, she said, "He didn't look angry." James nodded. "That's the worst part." The next morning. When she woke, the world already knew. Clips from the restaurant had hit social media overnight. Not the full story, just enough. A woman in white silk standing over a waiter, wine dripping from her glass. A composed black man stepping in with calm authority. The captions wrote themselves. Entitled "Socialite Scolds Waiter. Stranger's Response Silences Her Instantly." Rich Woman's Arrogance Meets Reality Check in Fine Dining Showdown. Millions of views, hundreds of thousands of comments. Victoria scrolled through them with numb fingers. The internet had decided who she was. Some comments were mocking. Some were furious. Most were condemning. One stood out. The man she insulted. That's Damon Ellison, the CEO who rebuilt American commerce. She picked the wrong person to humiliate. Her phone rang again, her publicist this time. "Victoria, we need to talk. You're trending, and not in a good way." "I can fix this," she said. "I'll issue a statement." "Don't," the publicist warned. "Every word will make it worse. Just stay quiet." But Victoria Whitmore didn't know how to stay quiet. That afternoon, she called a journalist she'd known for years, a lifestyle columnist who owed her favors. "It was a misunderstanding," she said over the phone. "He overreacted." The column hit the web within hours. By evening, Damon Ellison's office released a single-line statement. No comment. People's behavior speaks for itself. That line, simple, sharp, and dignified, went viral faster than any press release. It became a meme, a quote, a headline. Victoria's attempt at control had backfired spectacularly. She poured herself a drink and stared at her reflection again. He didn't even have to fight back, she thought. He just stood there and I lost everything. That night, James came into the study holding his phone. It's official, he said. Ellison Holdings has suspended all review of partnerships with Whitmore Industries. They're moving their defense logistics deal elsewhere. Victoria blinked. That's hundreds of millions. James looked tired, older somehow. You humiliated the wrong man. He turned away before she could answer. For the first time, Victoria Whitmore felt the kind of silence she couldn't control, not social, not polite. The silence of consequence. The morning after the video hit the internet, the world moved fast. Too fast for apologies, too fast for control. By sunrise, 3 hashtags with Victoria Whitmore's name were trending on X, TikTok, and LinkedIn. A strange combination of outrage and fascination. The clip of the wine spill had been remixed, slowed down, captioned, and meme-ified. When she opened her phone, there were thousands of notifications. News outlets ran with headlines like, Billionaire's wife humiliates stranger. Turns out he's the CEO of Ellison Holdings. Grace under fire. Damon Ellison's calm reaction sets internet ablaze. The public didn't know the full story, but they didn't need to. The optics were enough. By 10 a.m., Whitmore Industries stock dropped 7 points. Investors panicked. Journalists gathered outside their office tower. The security guard looked at Victoria differently when she walked in. James was already in the conference room, phone pressed to his ear, face pale. Victoria, it's bad. Ellison's people won't answer. Our PR team says no comment until legal approves a statement. Her voice trembled for the first time. How bad? He slid a tablet across the table, the headline from CNBC. Ellison Holdings reevaluates multi-billion-dollar defense partnership amid scandal. Victoria stared at it. They can't. They can, James said quietly, and they will. Across the city, Damon Ellison sat in his office overlooking the bay, phone buzzing nonstop. His assistant poked her head in. Media wants a statement, sir. He shook his head. No statement. The more you speak, the less they hear. He closed the laptop, walked to the window, and watched the fog roll over San Francisco. The man didn't need revenge. Truth was already doing the work for him. In the silence of that office, a phrase from his father came back to him. Let time do what anger can't. By noon, the video had crossed 10 million views. Talk shows debated it. Commentators dissected his posture, his tone, his restraint. Words like grace, dignity, and power were repeated over and over. Victoria's phone rang again, her father this time. Do you realize what you've done? He snapped. I said it was an accident. Accidents don't go viral, Victoria. Behavior does. The line went dead. She sat there in silence, surrounded by flowers and art and everything money could buy, yet feeling like she was standing barefoot in a storm she started. That night, the company board met in emergency session. The call wasn't about ethics, it was about survival. Their largest defense client had followed Ellison's lead and paused collaboration pending review. In less than 24 hours, decades of networking were unraveling. James leaned back in his chair, exhausted. We built a reputation on reliability, Victoria, but perception is reality now. A director chimed in over the speaker. Public trust is currency. Ours just crashed. Victoria barely heard them. Her mind replayed Damon's calm face again and again. He didn't have to say a thing. Meanwhile, at Ellison Holdings, staff gathered in the auditorium. Reporters had been trying to sneak inside for interviews, but Damon addressed his team directly. "Don't waste energy on noise," he said. "The real story here isn't about humiliation or power. It's about how we act when the world is watching." His employees applauded quietly. They felt pride not because their boss had won, but because he hadn't lowered himself to the fight. Later that evening, a journalist caught him leaving the building and asked, "Do you think Mrs. Whitmore deserves forgiveness?" Damon paused, then answered softly, "Everyone deserves a chance to learn. Whether they take it is up to them." That line hit the airwaves within an hour. It turned a scandal into a master class in grace. Across town, Victoria scrolled through comments under his quote. "This man's humility is everything. Power doesn't shout, it speaks through silence." Each line felt like another mirror held up to her flaws. By midnight, an emergency email arrived. The board had voted to suspend her from all public-facing duties until the matter cools down. She poured a glass of water, but her hand shook. When she looked out the window toward the skyline, the Ellison building glowed in the distance, calm, steady, untouched. The next morning, paparazzi waited outside her gate. The flashbulbs exploded as she stepped into the car. For the first time, no one was calling her glamorous. They were calling her infamous. Inside the vehicle, James spoke without looking up. "Damon's Foundation just announced a new scholarship for hospitality workers. They're nomming it after the restaurant staff you yelled at." Her breath caught. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "He's rewriting the story, turning your mistake into someone else's blessing." Victoria turned her face to the window. For the first time in her adult life, she had nothing to say. 2 days later, she returned quietly to that same restaurant. No entourage, no camera, no jewelry. The maitre d' hesitated but led her to a corner booth. The same waiter approached, uncertain. She looked up and said simply, "I came to apologize." He nodded slowly, "Thank you, ma'am." She placed a folded check on the table. "For the staff fund. I heard about the scholarship." When she left, no one clapped, no one filmed, but for the first time she didn't care. The story wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd watched it and learned something about quiet strength. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the bay. Somewhere in that glow, the Ellison building stood tall, not as a monument to wealth, but to restraint. And for the first time, Victoria Whitmore understood. You can lose everything in a moment, but dignity, once lost, takes a lifetime to rebuild. Night spread over the bay like ink, the city lights flickering in reflection across the water. Inside his office, Damon Ellison stood by the window, tie loosened, jacket draped over a chair, the quiet hum of the city below like an orchestra winding down after a long performance. He could still hear the echo of that evening at the restaurant, not the laughter, not the whispers, but the sound of the piano restarting after the silence. The moment the room had decided what kind of man he was. He didn't feel triumphant, just thoughtful. His assistant stepped in softly. "Sir, CNN's requesting an interview about the incident. They want your comment on forgiveness." Damon smiled faintly. "Tell them forgiveness doesn't need a microphone." She nodded and left. The office fell quiet again. He picked up a small framed photo on his desk, his parents on their wedding day, smiling in black and white. His father had been a postman, his mother a teacher. They had never owned much, but they'd owned themselves, and that had been enough. He whispered to the empty room, "You'd have told me to keep my head high and my heart clean." He turned back to the window. Across the water, the city glimmered, including the tall silhouette of the Whitmore Tower. The lights were dimmer now, only a few floors lit, a silent monument to how fast power can fade when it isn't rooted in character. He didn't hate them. In truth, he pitied them, trapped in a world where image had replaced integrity. He thought of the waitress who had stepped between them that night, trying to calm things before they spiraled. He'd made sure the new scholarship in her name was funded for 10 years. Thousands of workers would get a chance she never had. That, to him, was justice, turning embarrassment into opportunity. He gathered his things and headed out. Later that night, the streets were mostly empty, the rain soft against the windshield as Damon's car rolled down the bridge. Jazz played low from the speakers, Coltrane, slow and meditative. At a red light, he glanced at a message that had come in hours ago. "Mr. Ellison, this is Victoria Whitmore. I know you don't owe me anything, but I wanted to say I'm sorry, truly." He read it twice. There was no arrogance in it this time, no defense, just regret. He typed nothing back, not out of spite, but because sometimes silence is the answer. The world had already taught her what she needed to learn. When the light turned green, he put the phone face down and drove on. The city rolled by, glass towers, bridges, neon signs reflected in puddles. He thought about how fragile reputation was, how easily respect could vanish if you forgot that everyone deserves it. His father's words echoed again. Respect ain't given, it's earned, but you earn it most when you give it first. Damon smiled. A week later, his company released a quiet statement, not about the scandal, but about gratitude. In every interaction, we choose who we are, choose grace, choose truth, choose dignity. It was signed simply, D. Ellison. The message went viral again, but this time for different reasons. People called it the classiest closure to a viral storm. Meanwhile, Victoria Whitmore retreated from public life. She began volunteering at community events, not for cameras, but for herself. She learned the kind of lesson that doesn't come from books or money or influence, but from loss. The city moved on. The internet found a new story. But for everyone who'd watched that video, the wine spill, the silence, the calm correction, something had changed. It wasn't just about race or class or status. It was about the power of restraint in a world addicted to reaction. It was about a man who proved that you don't have to raise your voice to be heard. That night, Damon stood once more on his balcony, a glass of water in hand, watching fog drift over the Golden Gate. He spoke softly, as if to anyone who might be listening beyond the horizon. Some battles aren't won by shouting, they're won by standing tall. He let the words hang in the cool air for a moment, then turned off the light, leaving only the city glowing behind him. And the story, like the man himself, ended in silence. But a silence that said everything.